Here we are. Welcome to another Workshop Wednesday. I'm Dan DeLong with Kate, joining us from ADP. Getting tongue-tied today. Carrie's on vacation today, and Kate is about to go on vacation, so she is probably mentally not even here for the workshop. I read a I was listening to an audio. Back in my early working days, and I think it was Zig Ziglar, and he was talking about, how it would be awesome if people are as productive every day the day before they go on vacation, right? Because you're probably running on all cylinders, right?
Yep. I hate putting work off to other people, so I try to get everything done, or at least as much as I can done. And then I have a little checklist that I'll send off to my boss and be like, hey, these are the things I just need you to check up on while I'm gone. But I try to get that list down to as minimal as possible. This way it's just coasting. I don't have to go on vacation and not worry about it.
Right. But imagine if you were that efficient every day and you didn't have a vacation to butt up against.
I think I'd get drained. I think I would be mentally drained.
Maybe there's probably some point to that. So today, actually, we're going to be talking we're continuing our series on payroll fundamentals, and today our topic of the day for payroll is going to be employee versus contractor. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll actually have someone from the audience. I'm actually going to be talking to JC, who I had worked with a couple weeks ago on an issue, and we'll talk about his situation and how that got resolved, and really what was the underlying issue with that with regards to Intuit accounts and logins. So real fun stuff here on the on the workshop. So let's start talking about employees and contractors. And I spent most of my working days as an employee, and when I was thinking about starting my own business, one of the things that appealed to me, or kind of like one of my mindset or philosophies, is that I didn't want to have employees, right? Because I worked at a large corporation, and I saw a lot of employees feeling the sense of entitlement, right? That comes across when you're an employee. I remember specifically the soda machines were subsidized by the company, and it was only a quarter to get a can of soda, and people would abuse that, right? And they would come in with $3 in quarters and get a case of soda, and then empty out the soda machines, and then things got costs got higher and things like that, and they stopped subsidizing the cost of soda, and then it was the $1.50 or whatever, and you would have thought the sky had fallen the day that was announced that the soda machines were no longer a quarter for a can of soda.
If you abuse it, you're going to lose it.
Right. And it wasn't because of the abuse, but I had seen that people would be emptying out and putting in their quarters and taking their, because that was cheap soda cases.
Yeah, well, going on the boat for the weekend, I grabbed the soda from work, 25 cents each, everyone hand over your quarter. Exactly.
That's one of the things that I was thinking of, is when it comes to, okay, am I going to have employees? Those types of needs, right, that employees have, on top of everything else that we've been talking about, of the extra cost of having an employee that costs for an employer. I would just deal with subcontractors, right? Because then I don't have to put up with complaints of soda not being subsidized and things like that. Have you talked to companies where they're debating of whether to deal specifically just with contractors versus employees?
Yeah, that's definitely a question that comes up a lot. There's actually an IRS checklist that is about 20 questions. And if you answer no, then they really should be a contractor. If you answer yes, they should be an employee. Granted, the IRS literally has an asterisk that says this may vary depending on the person. So it's definitely a very gray line. But if they're, my rule of thumb, which don't hold me to this, but is if they represent your company as far as like wearing the shirt, if they're set hours, if you reimburse them for like travel, gas, any of those things, if that's a yes, they should be an employee. But if they kind of come in on a project to project basis, they can pick up work where they want to. They're not expected to, show up to the office or show up virtually at 8 a.m. and clock off at 5 p.m. and complete every task that's on their job description, then they should be like a contractor. So it's definitely a very thin line. And I believe it was last year, around like May, this time last year was when the IRS was starting to really crack down on, 1099s versus W-2s, because a lot of people just put them on contractors. It's so much easier as the business owner, but really a lot of them should be an actual employee.
Yeah. Like, when I stopped near the end of my time at Intuit, they had a probably about in the building that I was working in, it was probably a good percentage of contractors. They had contracted out with a company, and they were the employee. They were their employees, so they handled all of the other extra costs and benefits if there were any kind of things with that. But they were treated like employees, right? Like they had to come, some of those things that you mentioned, they had to come in at a certain time. They had to leave at a certain time. They had a badge, right? They had an Intuit badge. So that really, I don't want to get into it in trouble, but, but
it's
they
such
were
a great
treated like an employee, but I'm sure they were, they were walking the legal line. I'm not going to say they were doing anything, improper, but they were treated like an employee, but they were paid like a contractor. They paid paid the company that was. So how does temp agencies work like that? Is that something that you have some familiarity with?
I actually don't. I don't think I've ever.
Curveball.
You threw me a curveball there. I mean, my 2 years at ADP, and I've never actually worked with a temp company before. So yeah, I actually don't have an answer for that, Dan.
Okay. But that's kind of like a similar type of situation, where a company wants an employee, but they pay somebody else that's actually, they're handling the W-2 piece of that. They're just paying the temp agency company. So whether they're considered an employee or a contractor, I think that's again, the gray line. But what are some of the benefits that you see of having an employee versus a contractor when you're talking to some of the businesses that you work with?
When they're an employee, not that you ever have full control of your employees who are going to do whatever they want to do.
Yeah, but when they're slavery.
It's not slavery. But when they're an employee, like you're expected, like I'm expected to show up to work in the morning at a certain time, and I'm supposed to work, even if I work from home, I'm supposed to work until the end of the day, which is obviously what ADP sets for us. Whereas if I'm a contractor, I could just, hop on this workshop Wednesday, get paid for that, hop on a meeting in the morning.
Or not.
Or not. I mean, go out to Starbucks, go shop, and I got my to-do list is very long before tomorrow. So, I mean, maybe just skip out on that. But no. So it gives you a lot more of control as far as like what you need, what you expect out of them. Whereas the contractor, they can just, if they don't want to show up or they don't want to do the stuff, they're just not going to get paid for it. Not like you can fire them because, I mean, they're not going to get paid. They're not going to work. So it definitely gives you, you as the owner, more flexibility choosing what you want them to do if they're a contractor. But if you want them to show up every day, complete X amount of tasks kind of like routinely, it gives you more control. I don't like to use the word control because they're, like you said, they're not your property.
Right. But those expectations of the work that the employee or the contractor is doing is the definitions of that is a little less flexible, less.
Yeah.
It's more rigid.
It's such a gray area.
and then on the flip side of that, there's more cost associated with being with having employees, and then there's all sorts of laws and rules and things. There's a minimum that you can pay these people, right? There's federal minimum wage, right? So that's not the case when it's a contractor, as long as it's agreed upon terms.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
So I was going to say, there is businesses that do have like a mixture of the two. Like I have a previous company that I've actually worked for, I was a W-2 worker there, but we also had 1099 workers, and it's just based off of what your tasks are and what your day-to-day is and what that company seems to feel the value. So you don't have to have all your employees be W-2. You don't have them all be 1099. You can have just one 1099 contractor if they're not going to fully represent your company to the W-2 standard. So it's that flexibility in that gray area.
Right. And then I think the added caveat or the added benefit is of having, contractors is that when the work is done, I mean, for temporary, workforce needs, when that work is done, the contract's over, and then they move on to something else, and it's a very clean break. It's like you don't have to have, unemployment and then things of that nature.
No unemployment. And it's just crazy since it is such a gray area, how high of a risk it is. Because if they don't classify them correctly, and they say they class them as a 1099 when they really should be a W-2, there's fines from the IRS. You have to pay back taxes, liability for benefits. There's so many, it's a major area, and they're definitely, as of last year, are actually cracking down on it. Whereas beforehand they were a little more lenient. So it's definitely something to, even if someone's been a 1099 worker for 5 or 6 years, and based on this conversation or based on things you're reading that maybe they really should be a W-2, definitely something to evaluate and to look at, because just because they are a 1099, they can always get moved over to W-2. Or if you're thinking, hey, you know what, maybe they sound more like a contractor, you can save out on some money on taxes, definitely different things to just evaluate. It doesn't have to be a one-time decision and move on from there.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's just a lot of things to consider when it comes to whether or not you're, hiring employees or hiring or working with contractors. So as we, continue to talk about, these payroll fundamentals, that's just something to consider as an employer or as a business owner, whether you're going to be doing that and just bearing those topics in mind. And Kate, if you could forward that checklist to me, and I'll put that in the comments of the Facebook group, or in the course that we're creating on School of Bookkeeping about the payroll fundamentals.
I will add it to my to-do list.
Add it to your
longer, Dan.
Sorry.
It's okay.
All right. So I am going to promote one of our guests to a panelist, so we should be able to see him. So thanks for joining us, JC. There you are, and JC's stands for Juan Carlos. Do you prefer JC or Juan Carlos, or does it matter?
People know me by JC, so we'll go with JC.
All right, we'll go with JC. So we came in contact to each other. You posted a cry for help on a Facebook group, and tell us a little bit about your story or your situation, and then we'll talk about kind of like the underlying issues that was involved with that. So go ahead and what happened?
So this was probably 3 weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. I had logged in the night before into the QuickBooks accountant version. I was working on client data. Everything was working great. And then the next day I go in to continue my work and get into QuickBooks and get into work and all that. And I logged in and I got an error message. It said your login credentials weren't valid. It said that, what did it say?
I think the message, and that's what tipped me off when you messaged that. your account has been deactivated.
Deactivated. Yeah, I'm like, what?
Right. So, and this was just for those that are following along. He's just trying to log into QuickBooks, and this is the message that he gets into QuickBooks Online: is your account's been deactivated. So, so that's a panic for an accountant trying to log into QuickBooks Online during tax season.
During tax season,
because there's not much you can do after that when it says your account's been deactivated. So, what happened? What steps did you take at that point besides crying for help on Facebook?
Right. So to be fair, I did receive some Intuit emails. It said, "Hey, you've been, I guess, randomly chosen to have your account verified. We need some information." And at first I thought, oh, it's a scam. Like, I just kind of glanced over the email. It's a scam. They're just trying to fish for information and whatnot. And, I sent you the link to that to see if it was a legit link. And you showed me a couple ways of how to tell it was legit. It looked legit and everything. I went ahead and uploaded some documents. They use Box as a service to upload documents. So I did that. They requested driver's license and or passport to verify the information. But at the same time, I don't know if they even looked at that. At the same time, you kind of walked me through it. Originally, before I talked to you, actually, I had talked to I called in support, and they wanted me to fill out a form to basically take request ownership of my account again. And I was going to go through that process, right? Not knowing.
At least you knew you were talking to Intuit at that point, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
As far as getting a random email, which that is if somebody's asking you for your driver's license through an email, that just smells fishy.
A little
literally.
Suspicious, yeah.
But in this case, it was actually legitimate.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to share my screen here, and we'll talk a little bit about the confusion and I'm showing the screen here of the error message, right? You can see that. Okay, perfect. So this is actually an Intuit page. And why am I seeing this page? Your account has been deactivated error. So basically what was happening in JC's case is there was some suspicious activity on his account, right? And it's no fault of his own, right? Hackers are relentless, right? They're always looking for, weaknesses. And, there's data leaks all over the place, and, someone somewhere may have been trying to, get into his Intuit account from another site or from another location, or maybe his VPN was being bounced off of, Russian satellites. I don't know, right? This could be anything, right? So the point is, though, is that the confusion lies around the Intuit account, because there's terms that are thrown around with regards to anything dealing with Intuit that can be confusing. You just even in QuickBooks, right? If you're talking to a client and they say the word invoice, well, are they talking about a customer invoice, or are they talking about a vendor invoice, right? Because they mean totally different things when you're talking about vendor versus customers. So what actually happened to JC was his login was deactivated, right? And because he had contacted QuickBooks, they thought he was talking about his QuickBooks service was deactivated, but not. He wasn't even getting that far, because he couldn't even log in, right? So the way I try to explain this to folks, like when they used to call me, is that your login is your identity, right? That is who you are, and then attached to that identity is things, products and services that Intuit offers. So QuickBooks is one of those products. Here are TurboTax is another. Mint, just here on the screen. All of those things are tied to an Intuit identity, and they call that an account, right? So that's actually what was deactivated, was his login. And it would have been nice if it would just say your login is deactivated, because he's trying to, get into one of those services, which is QuickBooks at this point, and it's saying your account has been deactivated. So that leads itself to confusion, right? Because as the way you mentioned on the Facebook post, he's like, well, I contacted QuickBooks and they say my account is paid for, right? All my clients are paid for. Everything's active there, and they started him down the path of requesting ownership of the QuickBooks account, which he already had, right? So what we ended up doing is, through School of Bookkeeping, we have a quick answers option where any of our members, they can log in, they can reach out to us, and we can reach out to some of the folks that work at Intuit. And what I did, just for just wanting to help, is I reached out to them and provided them some information, and they saw in the online tool of where they look at and see the account, which in this case the login, that it was indeed deactivated, and then all they had to do was reactivate it, send him a password reset, and then he was able to log in. And how long did that actually take once we actually started that process?
Within the next day. I mean,
yeah,
it wasn't even 24 hours, I don't think.
Right.
It was literally maybe 8 hours. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's because it was late at night. Right?
Yeah.
Otherwise,
right. I had to wait
like,
until the next day till they were actually in, so I could have somebody do that. So I had them do it the first thing. You're on the West Coast, right? So, but even before you woke up,
yep,
it was all ready for you.
Yeah.
So what was, and then the thing was, is that they started him on a process of claiming his own ownership of his QuickBooks, which is a lengthy process. It takes at least 10 to 14 days, which he was barking up the wrong tree, at no fault of his own or Intuit's, because they thought they were doing the right thing by him, and it may have worked, right? Because ultimately he would have been the master admin, and they would have sent him a password reset, which would have reactivated his account, because somebody would have actually seen that, oh, it's deactivated, so right, and it probably would have just worked, but it would have been 2 weeks of being down in tax season for an accountant, somebody in the accounting profession. Not a great experience, right?
No. Yeah, I mean, I had another experience with a different client, just trying to change the bank account.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened with this client was that they changed phone numbers, or they cut a line off, and the number that Intuit had was that old number. So when you're trying to change a bank account, they want to text you or call you with a security code. Well, because that line was no longer active, we had no way of changing that bank account. And I can't tell you how long it took. It probably took probably a month or two just to get to the right person who understood the situation and knew exactly what to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can see how this whole ordeal could have gone for weeks or maybe even months. I don't know.
Right. Because that happens sometimes, is that, somebody who started a service, they become, the first person who logs into any service inside of QuickBooks becomes it used to be called the master admin. Now it's called the primary admin. They're basically the person who puts their login stake in the ground, and says, I own this service, whatever it happens to be. And what happens sometimes is that that person is either an employee or a contractor, since we're talking about an employee or contractors. They're delegated to sign up for payments, for example, or they set up for payroll inside of QuickBooks. Now that person's contact information is listed as the primary admin of that service. They leave the company, but now that person is still in charge of that. So they don't even have access to the email or the phone numbers that were given, or that person's not being cooperative. There's all sorts of, and then of course the worst thing is that person passes away or something like that. Now they're no longer going to be able to respond to some of the requests that they're given. So if you have a situation where you don't have access to those types of things, then there are ways to do that. And that's where you have to prove your identity, right? So now the burden becomes on the person making the request. And that's why, they'll need to ask for, passports or driver's licenses. And because there are lots of unscrupulous people out there that pretend to be other people. And they need to make sure that sort of thing is in the case. So I wanted to show, you brought up a good point. So there's this article, Recover Your Account When You Can't Log In, right? Like, so if you still have the phone number and the email, that's easiest, right? So you can get to a place where you can receive those confirmation codes. But if you can't, then there is a change your email address form, which will allow you to fill out this form. Now, where are they? Where is it here? Change your email, consolidate. There used to be a form just like right on the send us a request. Oh, it takes me back there. There it is. Okay. So then you have your proof of identity, your driver's license, passport. And as long as you're on a site that says Intuit, right? Like you don't want like fishersrus.com to upload that information. But as long as you're here, that is a legitimate, site. It goes to the right people. And that's typically all they do is confirm identities based off of, what's been submitted. Of course, make sure it's nice and clear photo, no blurs and thumbs over the address or anything like that. So that's something that does happen, right?
Yeah.
So JC, overall, like how was your experience? I'm fishing for compliments here. No.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, like I told you in our messenger, in the messages, I couldn't thank you enough. I mean, I knew going through the process of just trying to change a bank account was painful enough. I could only imagine just getting completely locked out of my account of how long it would have taken. And like you said, I mean, the rep tried everything. They did everything I tried, resetting my password and all this and that. And they sent me to that form. They sent me the link to fill out that form to prove my identity. But, who knows how long it would have taken. It took.
Yeah.
But with your help, I can't thank you enough for getting me up and running in no time. Now, you did also give me some workarounds if we weren't able to get the account up and running. So you said basically create some email variations or have them add me as a user.
Right.
So that definitely could have worked if we couldn't get the account back as fast as you did. But I mean, just not bothering the clients with that extra step and whatnot was also
right. Yeah, because of course now that when you have to ask your client, depending on your relationship that you might have with them, that could be like, well, why can't he sign into?
Yeah. Might have
My
sounded kind of
QuickBooks.
fishy, huh? Yeah. So yeah, definitely. I can't thank you enough for the help and just getting me up and running within not even 12 hours. Seriously, like not even 12 hours. And that was only because it was nighttime.
Right. They were already closed.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the time we were going in there. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story.
Yeah, absolutely.
And talking with us on our workshop Wednesday. So next week we're going to be talking about. Whoops, I have my list of topics here.
The endless list.
Yeah, my list. So how does the owner get paid? And so that's the topic that we're going to be talking about with our payroll fundamentals. So hopefully you can join us next week for another workshop Wednesday. And thanks for joining us today. And I hope you have a great week.